Why is this camera not working now? Oh, wonderful. What is going on? Why is this camera not working?
Just maybe try unplug it and plug it back in.
Thank you. But never thought of that. Morning, everybody.
Morning.
I'm having IT issues. My camera is not liking me.
Is that an IT issue, Dirk?
I am. It's very unusual. Fixed.
Morning, everyone.
Morning, guys. Morning, Gareth.
Morning. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, you're well.
Yeah. Not bad. Just fighting to get a toddler dressed this morning, so that was fun.
Sorry, we just had a few IT issues this morning, which is unusual. Guys, can I ask that you turn your cameras on? Otherwise, Gareth's thinking he's talking to a stone wall.
Alex Bloomberg, nice to see you in the face, given that we've had a couple of emails.
Oh, hey, Barry, how's it going?
Good, thank you.
I'm not seeing anyone. Okay, there we have everyone. Never had a problem before, but anyway. It's just about a few more minutes for everyone to get in. I don't know what's going on today. It's my, it looks like you're all sitting in a movie theater. What have I done?
It's Ben causing havoc.
Is that Ben? Ben, I'm going to slap you.
I'll put it back. Kind of cool.
Sorry, guys, I'm rushing this morning. The traffic in was hectic, all these stop and goes. But anyway, we're here. Okay, guys. Ben, why don't you put it just on normal view, please?
So I thought I did change it back. Did it change, or is it just the same?
No, it's fine now. It's fine now. Okay, right. Guys, today, very kindly got Gareth as our guest today. I'm sure many of you know Gareth or know of Gareth. I've known him for quite a while. I've known Craig, who started Crue for many, many years. I've And the reason I wanted Gareth just to share his career story so far is because I think it probably would relate to a lot of the younger planners as to where you are, where you've been, and then obviously the possibilities of where one can go. I don't want to make Gareth feel too important, but he's a brilliant financial planner, obviously, and he's been part of a very successful team in building Crue Invest together with his colleagues. In fact, so much so that they won the practice or business of the year last year through the FPI. Gareth, what was the title?
Yeah, it's the professional practice of the year.
Yeah, which is quite a mean feat. So Gareth, well done again on that. Yeah, so I just, Gareth, what I've done is I know I sprung this on you very, but I did warn you about it before in one of our other sessions. And I know that you also share, because of your own experience, you share a passion for the industry, and then for particularly in cutting through the noise and focusing on what makes stuff work. So if you could please just just start at the beginning, where you started in the industry, where you're from, and then just your story of how you got to where you are. And if I can ask, if you guys can just write down questions, so let Gareth finish his thing, and then we can ask him at the end of that. Thanks. Over to you, Gareth.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Dirk. I'm not used to being given an opportunity to talk. I've been married long enough, so excuse me if I'm out of practice. But no, all jokes aside. So yeah, I think geez, if I go right back to the beginning, after school, I think like a lot of people, wasn't 100% sure what to do. Followed the sort of stock standard BCom route. And I think I started with like a BCom in marketing, just really didn't know where to go. And I think after about a year, kind of really found that, I enjoyed the financial aspects of things, something as simple as the concept of time value of money calculations just started to make sense. So basically pivoted into more of a financial management undergrad. Finished that. And then while I was studying, I was also working. So I was actually working in a cold store, of all places, in the waterfront in Cape Town. Just doing kind of like admin, general management, and that sort of thing. So, but it was interesting, it was long hours. It teaches you kind of to graft along when you need to, and probably was making too much money at that point in my life to feel like you needed to actually step off this job train and into a career. Eventually, kind of circled around to feeling like I needed to. From there. I don't know if anybody had the unfortunate experience of joining the Platinum Group at some point on the retail side, but basically that was like a chain of clothing stores and things. And I used to run the Akajo clothing store in Century City here in Cape Town, and it was probably the first kind of hard lesson to learn, where the recruitment guys kind of sold the package in terms of you'll have your own business and you'll be able to do your own thing, kind of being young, arrogant, and ambitious, thinking, great, this is going to be good. And then you realize you go in there and you're actually a glorified kind of store manager. And, so that didn't last too long, probably in and out of there in 6 months. And, from there, it was actually my father-in-law that introduced me to financial planning. So he had spent a couple of years at Discovery, and then kind of got whipped up into the Liberty stable through a friend of his that had one of their sort of external franchises. And yeah, that was kind of like, they were very, very excited to have me join. I think at the time, didn't realize before joining, it was a relatively small practice. But you kind of went in there with all the best intentions. And the first sort of year and a half was really good. You're young, you're fresh, you don't know what you don't know. So you're excited to get out there and start talking to people. But in the same breath, it wasn't like it came through a family with a big network. In fact, I still remember to the day, like exactly what my dad said to me when I told him I was joining Liberty. He said, well, good luck, but I'd never sit with someone who works there in terms of their business. So that was a bit of a shock to start with, not knowing what you're going into. So kind of, and the way we kind of well, the way I kind of created a bit of a practice and a bit of a business was having a crack at what they used to call the orphan clients. So it was just going into this gigantic room where there are quite literally thousands of those little yellow manila files with people who some advisor who had come and gone in the practice had sold the policy to and just had kind of left them behind. So you're kind of on the phone every day speaking to these people, and probably 80% of the time you're being, told your fortune backwards and how terrible you are, but you kind of just learn to say thank you very much. And, but eventually you kind of get a couple of appointments and you go out and start seeing some people, and, you kind of like do a little bit of a servicing on what they've got, maybe a bit of a realignment, a bit of a catch up. But certainly, in that world, there was no introduction to financial planning. That was proper sales. It was targets. It was, kind of what's your production? How much this are you doing? How much of that are you producing? In fact, I remember like thinking back at the world that we live in today in terms of a file check and compliance, and that compared to what a file check looked like there. It was my sort of manager, the owner of the franchise. Sorry, my daughter's saying goodbye to you. Good, Babs. Have a nice day at school. So his version of checking the file was to flip it open, and the sort of receptionist there, her responsibility was to write how much commission each policy or whatever was going to bring in that you had filed. He checked it, signed it off. That was compliance done. And that was quite scary. So you did all of that, and then probably like most of the way through the second year, your production numbers are a bit down because you're kind of spending some time going out and seeing those people that you'd seen the year before, catching up, doing an annual review. And eventually, probably around about the September, my numbers weren't exactly what they were the year before. And he said to me, like, kind of called in for a meeting and said, what's going on? Like, why is the big drop off? Like, is there anything I can help you with? What are you busy with? And I explained what I've been doing in terms of these reviews and going out and seeing the people, etc. And he still looked at me and said, but I don't understand. Like, if you're not making any money from it, what's the point? And that was a little bit of a light bulb moment in terms of saying, like, hey, I can't spend a lifetime building a business and a practice in this environment. So there, kind of like from there, it spiraled off, and it probably took me about a year to really find the right home to go to. It wasn't an instantaneous thing. And I think like in most things in life, like my introduction to Liberty was a personal sort of happenstance. And so happened with Crue. Craig and Sue are very, very big into water polo. They had a Crue academy, and my wife's a swimming teacher, and her and her sister were actually doing the swim fitness training for the academy. And I just happened to get to know Craig and Sue on the side of the pool. And we got chatting, and this is going back about 10 years now. There used to be, through the old Axis and SP community, there used to be a monthly session where a speaker would come down and the practices would invite clients to come and listen to a topic and that sort of thing. And I just kind of used to cotton onto that with Craig and say, look, can I come through and join? And I stood at Liberty at that stage and just come and listen, to kind of learn. And I think through those engagements and listening, and it eventually kind of, I don't remember exactly what the straw was, but you kind of wake up one day and say, look, I cannot face going back to this office or this environment anymore. And I picked up the phone and I said to Craig, look, this is my situation. This is my story. I can't do this anymore. And he said, Lacko, well, come in, let's chat. I thought I was going in to chat to him. Little did I know I was walking to the office and there was a full array of board and shareholders waiting for me in the meeting. And basically kind of, we chatted through in terms of how do I view planning and people and the approach. And it kind of all seemed to line up. And then Craig kind of phoned me and said, look, we'd love to have you join, but the reality is that the business can't afford to pay you right now. So I said, no, that's fine. I've built up a bit of reserves and some cash and that sort of thing. And then for the first 6 months, I didn't actually earn a salary. Kind of spent my time just effectively kind of communicating with the decent clients. And when I say that, it wasn't the guys with money, it was the sort of decent people that I kind of got to know along the way at Liberty. Offered them a solution in terms of saying, look, this is what I've done. This is where the move has come across. And then the inevitable happens. You kind of move some people across. It starts to cost commission on Liberty side. So then they come after you, saying, right, well, this is how much money you owe us, etc., etc. We tried to fight it, but eventually had to settle. So it actually cost me money to leave that environment, to step away, and then kind of earn nothing on the other side for the first good few months. But yeah, from there, once the ship steadied, it was the right place. It was the right way to do it. I think it's a good long-term view. And then I think thankfully just having really good people around you as well made it a lot easier to kind of practice the way that you want to practice. I mean, I learned an incredible amount in those first 6 months. I think once you step out of the very narrow world that you've been trained in terms of particularly an insurer, to realize that the breadth and scope of what we do is a hell of a lot bigger than the product, and start to focus on the planning side. I was introduced to the lifestyle financial planning, the way it's kind of been structured since the late 90s. And I think over time, it's been almost 10 years now. It's difficult at first. It takes a number of years in the beginning to get it going. But I think like we explain to people within our business, like with the client's investment, that success line is a J curve. So as you get it going, it starts to exponentially grow. But the hardest part is those first sort of 3, 5, 10 years, just depending on where you're at. But once you get over that hill, the momentum starts to flow. And I think you kind of just get to a position where I love kind of Simon Sinek's thing where he says, like, the point is not to do the business with everyone. The point is to do business with people who believe what you believe. And I think we find that even within our practices, like, we have similar practices, like physically close to us, who do exactly what we do, but in slightly different ways. And ironically, we don't step on one another's toes in terms of clients, because then clients will eventually decide where it is that they feel most comfortable, because there is no perfect way to do this. Find a way that you believe in with conviction, and that you feel like it will work for clients, and then be adaptable to their needs. So yeah, that's kind of culminated in a business that's grown from, say, 300 million under management when I joined to one that's sitting on just on 2.2 billion under management now, in sort of 10 years. But having said that, it took us till about 2019, 2020. I think COVID sort of slowed everything down. That's when we hit our first billion. But then since then, we've added another one. So as I say, it's exponential growth. And yeah, I think we kind of all participate in it. And also having kind of being able to put together a team that you want to work with, guys who are there in supporting roles that understand what it is that they want to do, which then also allows you to kind of split out the technical planning part of things, sort of getting some people who are good at that onto that aspect, and yourselves who are wanting to be more client facing, in terms of developing those skills that you need to be able to effectively communicate, to work with those people, to adapt to their needs. So yeah, and that's where we are today. So I am just short of 12 years in the industry, so not quite as weathered as Dirk, but still got some energy and kind of excited to see where things are going to go.
Thanks, Gareth. You made that sound quite simple. I was hoping you'd make it a bit tougher. Gareth, those early years, before we get other guys' questions, I mean, those early years, you kind of breezed over it, and so I know that you're obviously quite a go-getter out there. So I mean, what was the real difference for you between that first year where your numbers were pretty good, and then the second year where it started to get tougher, and then also, what challenges did you face personally, financially? Because obviously, most people expect to be earning more next year than they were earning last year. But when that doesn't happen, if you could just chat through that, please.
Yeah, I think obviously the earnings part is the big challenge. I think whether it's what we do or any business, you know, the cash flow is king. You've got to be able to have that to keep yourself going. So look, I was fortunate in that I've always been a relatively disciplined financial person. So even when I was working before there at that like cold store environment, I kind of like I'd been, in fact, my father-in-law had sold me like a Liberty savings endowment policy thing. So I kind of had some cash there to be able to go into. But yeah, I think you just learn to adjust your lifestyle. You know, I think you learn about how little that you really need to live on to get by. And, you know, I was fortunate to have a partner who's my kind of wife now, who, you know, was also happened to be starting out her business. So we were kind of in the trenches together. And yeah, I think you've really got to hang tough. You've got to see the big picture, the long-term potential. And I think the temptation when I saw the guys kind of come and go, like the guys who flamed out at like the Liberty thing. I mean, the pattern was obvious. They'd come in, they'd go and sell policies to all their friends and family. They'd run out of those, and then they didn't have a genuine client. You know, somebody who they didn't know personally, who maybe felt obligated to sit with them. And then once that well dried up, then they ran out of legs, and kind of then their cash flow just went to shit, and couldn't carry on. So I think it's very normal to need to go into a bit of debt. I remember I'd been running around in my little golfy Skadonk student car that we always had, kind of being young and dumb, got myself like a lovely little secondhand Audi A3, thinking I'd made it. And then the first thing I did was actually go and sell the Audi and go back to the golf, because, you know, kind of needed the cash, like rather. Yeah, I never found, I mean, the guys used to joke around the office, maybe it is more that sales environment, that flippant debate around what kind of car do you arrive at a client for, you know, and what impression does it send? I was like, well, geez, that's the first 10 seconds. You're going to have a meeting with them for an hour and you're worried about this tiny little fraction of time, you know, and also if you're so worried about what car you're arriving in, you're probably not feeling very comfortable or competent in your own ability in terms of what you've got to present. So focus on the right thing. So yeah, it is tough. I think you've got to get very comfortable with rejection. I think luckily for me growing up, I'm not a very good looking guy, so I got very used to that. So that also helped. But you know, I think it's exactly that. I think you've got to know in your mind that you've got something that's going to offer a lot of value to people's lives. And you're going to sometimes pick up the phone or engage with someone, particularly in that environment where you are doing a hell of a lot of cold calling and that sort of thing, where that person might very well need what you've got, but they're just not in they're not in the right space, they're not in the right day. We have people who come to us even today and we explain what we do, how we do it, and they go off and then we don't hear from them. I got a lady right now sent a proposal to that yesterday who I sent through during COVID, during the lockdown in 2020. She phoned me out of the blue almost 4 years later, apologizing for not joining us back then and realizing she had made a mistake. Like, you know, sometimes it's not you, it's those people that they're just not ready for it at that time. And other times you're going to come in and it's the perfect time. So yeah, I think you've got to realize that, you know, there's so much parallel between what we explain to clients in terms of these are how markets move. This is what you should expect. You know, this is not just an easy one-way street. There's going to be difficult times, etc., etc. You know, building your client base, your practice is exactly the same. It's exactly the same for any business. So I think you've just got to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, but also like realize that kind of getting to the finish line is not always the goal. You know, enjoy the process. You know, sometimes when you get that rejection or whatever, you build that mindset and you say like, okay, cool. Like, let me sit down and kind of unpack what I said, what their response was. Sure, maybe I was a bit too pushy here. Maybe I was a little bit not empathetic enough on that side. You know, it's an opportunity to kind of refine yourself and your skills as well. It's not just about, although earning from it is necessary to keep going. That's not always the most valuable thing that you can take out of an engagement.
Thanks, Gareth. So, I mean, I think your self-belief streams through, which I think is a huge contributor to the success you've had. But if if I ask anyone here to come and work for 6 months without earning a salary, I'm not too sure there'd be too many takers. I mean, you know, what was it that allowed you to have that faith? Because after 6 months, they could have said, look, it's not working out, and you know, 6 months could become 12 months. So, I mean, what was it? What had convinced you about the conversations with Craig and Sue and the team that that you wanted it so badly? Because I mean, that's a remarkable sacrifice to make. You know, and with no guarantee of it actually, you know, becoming something permanent.
Yeah, I think any situation, it's all about framing. You know, you can look at it in terms of the risk, but anytime there's risk, there's opportunity. So I kind of said, okay, fine, the risk is that it doesn't become a permanent thing, but then the risk is I stay where I am, and I just hate it even more and more and more. So, you know, quite honestly, by the time you went through that, it wasn't even the fear factor goes. The fact is that like a Liberty, or whenever you're a retired agent, you know, you're on that same bubble all the time anyway. You know, you've got to go out there, you've got to create your own paycheck. So for me, it wasn't necessarily a very new concept. You know, when I say I wasn't paid, like, you know, the business couldn't afford to pay me anything, but Craig said, look, you can, whatever business you can generate, we can have a fee sharing thing or whatever. So it obviously wasn't great because it took many, many months to go. I mean, it took us about over 2 months, probably 2.5 months for Liberty just to take me off their bloody rep register. So, you know, they don't worry too much about compliance. Even that was a fight. So, you know, so there's going to be these bumps in the road and that sort of thing. But you kind of look at it and you eventually step back and say, right, if I give this horns for the next 10 years, where do I want to be? Do I want to be deeply embedded in like this sort of tired agent turmoil, where you kind of wake up most months to starting on zero all the time? Or do you want to kind of be able to create a practice where you're starting off much, much lower and you're earning a lot slower, but it's a hell of a lot more stable, and you're going to be able to build something that you can stand on?
Thanks, Gareth. Becky, I see you have a question.
Yes, I do. Thanks, Gareth. I probably missed a big part of the earlier part of your presentation, but the part I got, you know, quite inspiring. So I wanted to ask you a question. You know, like when I'm just looking at sort of like the trend these days of moving into this sort of advice-led, client, more focused approach, right? And you mentioned the point around doing the financial planning. And I think a lot of people, like, I mean, myself, when I was an advisor for 2.5 years, you know, the focus is on the actual, you know, selling and getting some clients through the door, right? And I'm just wondering, from your experience in the industry, even potentially your practice, I didn't get which practice you work for. Like how do you guys balance that dynamic of trying to lead with actual planning for clients, but then the reality that the person also needs to survive and do some selling as well? Do you do that with the same person now? So is it the same person doing the planning and doing the sort of like advice and product implementation, or do you split those two roles? And if you do split them, like how do you make your ecosystem work? How do you incentivize the different pieces of it? Like, you know, is it a revenue share? Who gets more? That sort of thing. Because I almost feel like that's the thing that most practices really struggle to turn a practice into a business. Because if you kind of get that right and you create a system that works, often that's how you see businesses that, you know, practices grow into bigger businesses. So I'm just curious your take on that, and just your personal experience and how you manage to sort of transition that gap, maybe personally or even for the practice or the business you're working for.
Yeah, I think, like, to your question, probably when you look, if you're doing, let's say, the planning properly, then the sale happens naturally, you know, because when you're doing a planning, you're taking somebody's objectives, you're taking somebody's challenges, and what you're doing is you're constructing an effective solution for them. You know, that is what the plan is. Sure, it can be, it should be adaptable and flexible, but ultimately, like at some point, they're going to have to make a decision. And look, we have idealistic views of how we do planning and all things, but we've also got to face life realities. You know, so even a business like ours, you know, naturally went through a phase where the vast majority of its income was from insurance commission, because, you know, if you're meeting with a client and their policy is going to be $2,000 a month, and you get a 20,000 Rand commission there, and they're also saving quite disciplined, like effectively, and they're putting $5,000 a month into an RA, sure, like, you know, like they need to be doing those things, but naturally what you're earning out of the RA solution is a fraction of what you're going from the commission side. So I think from a selling standpoint, I mean, if you think about it, like if you are a client-facing planner, there is a sales element to it. And sales, you got to get the sales thing out of your head, because sales is kind of always presented as some like kind of dirty, sleazy kind of thing. No, I mean, if you think about it, name me a business on the planet that can survive without sales. It cannot. Everybody's moving a product, whether it's a physical product, whether it's a service. Even people who work in NGOs, I mean, you're selling goodwill, basically. So there has to be an element of that. In terms of like the support and that work, I think, you know, we only in a position now, say in the last 2 years, where we've started to hire younger planners, like recent graduates and that sort of thing. So they get a dual role. You know, they come in as paraplanners. So I'll have someone that works with me. And the reason they do the more technical planning work is not because I'm lazy and don't want to do it. It's because I'm trying to give them exposure to have enough practice, so that when we feel like they're ready to have clients that they own one day, they're competent enough to put plans together, to go and present to people. So, you know, I don't run from meeting to meeting every day. You know, like I'm involved in the planning process. Myself and my paraplanner sit. So she might draft the solution and that sort of thing. We work through it together. You know, it's an opportunity for me to understand her thinking. It's an opportunity for her to kind of like, you know, kind of stress test the solution that she's put together, lean on the experience, whatever the case is. And then it's not just the two of us. You know, we've built the practice to be very, very flatline or kind of level. So, you know, we often meet in pairs with clients. We often know one another's clients. There's no siloing off or anything like that. And yeah, so I think it's more difficult when you are smaller or getting going, but have a view plan of what it is that you want to do. If you want it to be like kind of your practice, like a one-man band kind of thing, then having qualified, like more junior people who can basically be a 2IC if the bus knocks you over, because that's the other reason for it, is that, you know, we do planning for clients in case something happens to them. What if something happens to me? So we want to make sure that somebody is at least most of the way capable of stepping into my shoes if I'm not around or not available. But it takes time, you know. So you've got to put your practice in a position where you can actually still be around 10 years from now, 20 years from now. That's got to be your focus up front. Trying to make decisions now about who's going to do the sales, who's going to do the admin, who's going to do the technical work. You know, in the beginning, you are that. That's what you do to start with. And you work long hours. But once you start transitioning more into a practice field, yes, you can start bringing people in who will be able to do that work. But it's got to be your like, what is your intention about bringing them in? What are you bringing them in for? So we're bringing them very much with the viewpoint that they will be planners within our business in the next couple of years.
Thanks, Gareth. Thanks, Becky. Great question. If I can just also say, I think one of the reasons I wanted Gareth to chat to us is, you know, we're all very active on social media, and we all now have access to some of the greatest planners in the industry all around the world. And there are a lot of people telling us how we're meant to be doing our job and how to run the most brilliant and efficient practice and business and all the rest. But the reality is that what we do is a journey, and like anything in life, You know, if you end up playing for the Box or for the Proteas one day, you don't just at 18 decide I'm going to start playing cricket and get some coaching and then you join the team. You know, in most cases, it's years and years and years of experience, of knocking your head, of overcoming obstacles that eventually get you to where you are. And I mean, that's why I wanted Gareth here. So I mean, he made his story sound really cool and smooth, but I know it was a lot tougher than that. And I think, Becky, your question is a great question, but it relates to a mature business, almost like a corporate business that we can walk into. And I know most people on this call aren't there. Most of them are starting their careers, or they're single person practices or 2-person practices. And I think it's important to just understand that that this is a journey, and it's not something that you're just going to slip into overnight.
So Dick, if you allow me, so I was actually more curious when someone is transitioning from that sort of solo financial advisor. I mean, I was a financial advisor myself for 2.5 years, and sort of doing everything on my own. You're like your own PA, you're a power planner, you do the advice, you do the selling, right? So I'm sort of like where Gareth is, you know. So I wasn't really mostly sort of focusing on the big corporates. I'm actually really curious around that transition from sort of like running like a one-man shop into actually trying to run a bigger practice or a successful business, because I think that's the part that is actually quite tricky, because obviously once you got a lot of resources and you're bigger and you can do full specialization within the broader business, it becomes a bit of a more obvious sort of play. But that transition between the two, I think, is actually the more trickier part. But yeah, but thanks for your response, Gareth.
Yeah, Becky, maybe just
sorry, just I think, Becky, I didn't mean corporate. What I mean, so there are still many very big practices that operate in silos where everyone is kind of running their own business within the business. And I think a lot of those are still sales businesses and not lifestyle businesses. But yeah, Gareth?
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I think once you hit that point, you've got to decide what it is that you want to become. Because it's exactly to that point. A lot of guys will get together because it's cost effective and it's easy to then outsource or collate all of your compliance and get like shared resources, get like a few admin people that service a few financial planners so the guys can run off in the client facing and somebody else does all the paperwork and the compliance work. That's one type of business. For us, in terms of like wanting to have a practice, you know, we kind of said like we'd like to have a practice that's still standing 100 years from now. So to be able to do that, you kind of got to focus on that objective, and that objective and like just simply comes down to that you've got to sacrifice today for tomorrow. You know, and a lot of the time the struggle comes in terms of the revenue, because basically to be able to employ people, to create a practice, to pay people salaries, to kind of invest in them for their longer term gain, you have to give up your income, you know, and big chunks of it. But also be comfortable with that. You've got to kind of get comfortable with what's important to you.
Thanks, Gareth. Dylan, you got your hand up.
Cool. Thanks very much. Thanks so much, Gareth. Very nice to meet you. Just a question I had from my side. I was having a look at your LinkedIn and I saw that you said that you specialized in employee benefits. Has that been a big part of your growth strategy within Crue and growing your assets under management? And does that make a big part of the assets under management that Dirk mentioned grew from 300 million and you said grew up to 2.2 billion? Was that a big source of, let's say, revenue to scale the practice? Or has it been more on individuals, firstly? And then secondly, I think we're also at a point now where we're also trying to scale. We're kind of trying to break away from the 1-man, 2-man, 3-man band type business and scale it a bit. But yeah, I think it's been made very clear in the meeting already that it's becomes very difficult because suddenly you're spending a lot of revenue on many salaries. And especially if you don't hire correctly, it can get even more difficult. So yeah, I just wanted some guidance on that.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. I need to go and update my LinkedIn then. No, look, the employee benefit part is something that I do, but I think so first of all, the AUM we mentioned now doesn't include any of the employee benefit schemes. That's all private clients. And the reason we don't really concern ourselves with the employee benefit AUM is because what's actually happened is those schemes that we run have kind of naturally occurred through the client base that we have. I just kind of, to be honest, I get bored with just doing one thing or the other. So that's why I kind of do, private clients and a bit of the EB stuff. So the EB stuff, the way we looked at it is to say, okay, fine, we've a lot of our clients are entrepreneurs, they've got their own businesses, sort of 30, 40, 50 people, whatever the case is. I think the biggest scheme we've got is about 170 people. So not massive companies, not massive corporates. And so we saw it as one kind of like, so you're dealing with the owner, right? And then you said, oh, geez, you've done so much for me. They tend to say, like, how do we give this good stuff to our staff? And then we kind of introduce, well, this is how group risk works, and this is how a pension works, and this is the value it can bring. And it sort of naturally occurs from there. So I would say every scheme that we've got, we've actually introduced from scratch. Like, we've never actually gone and pitched for a scheme that was already in place to try and say, look, we can do a better service or anything like that. So that's where the employee benefit side has come from. And then also from our personal side, we enjoy it because it's like, how do you provide high quality advice at scale? So it's kind of like, we want to make sure that people do that. We intuitively know kind of if people are economically active, if they're economically successful, that just all feeds back into the system, and it makes life better for everyone. So we want to contribute our little bit to that as well, and kind of knock on the butterfly effect. What was the second part of the question? Oh, the scale. Okay, so then I'll put you on the spot and kick it back to you and just say, okay, fine, just what do you mean by scale? What does scale mean for you?
I think scale would be scaling revenue, obviously. I mean, if you want to employ people, you have to proportionately scale your revenue. Otherwise, you're not going to have a business. As you said earlier, cash flow is king. So for us, we built the business off the back of employee benefits funds. So it was kind of a loaded question per se, because we have quite a few employee benefit clients and some are listed and quite big as well. But the issue that we found is you end up kind of catching a lot of employees that exit, resign, retire per se, and a lot of them are not ideal clients. And I know we meant to try and be the superheroes that help everyone, but unfortunately we are running a business at the same time. So you end up building quite a large client base of, let's say, a lot of clients that maybe don't fit your exact profile per se. So I would say, when I spoke about scaling, it's more around scaling your business around what you perceive to be your ideal clients, which bring you sufficient revenue to run your business.
No, look, it's a very, very difficult, because I completely empathize with what you're saying, because we struggle with the same thing. Like you've got people exiting in that. I think it comes down to the reality that kind of everything's got an opportunity cost, right? So if you spend X amount of time with this client because you want to be the superhero figure and you want to help everyone, if you're doing that on one side, what are you sacrificing on the other? And it's kind of like, is it fair to the other person that you could be helping or should be helping? That's kind of the way we look at it. I tend to have a conversation with most exiters, and we do. It's not a perfect science, but we try and gauge whether, like, how serious is this person? Because at the end of the day, it's kind of like, if you were a personal trainer and somebody, wanted to book hours with you, but that they're not serious, they're not going to pitch up, they're not going to come, or whatever the case is. It's not the fact that they're still paying you for those hours. It's that somebody else who will pay you the same, but really wants to be there and benefit from your time, could be there. That's the way we try and look at it as well. And then I think a lot of it comes down to, like, the service providers that you're using, the administrator and that sort of thing. There are a lot of counseling type things. There's a lot of value sometimes when you can see, like, sometimes the best advice is to say, guys, do an in-fund preservation. Stay in the strategy that we've recommended, so they still continue effectively with your advice at a cost-effective solution. And kind of like, so rather than sacrificing all the time to do a pres fund, yada, 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 sure, you might not make revenue from it, but like, what are what are you really worried about? Because to me, like, do you want to add another warm body that's going to cost you money every month to capture a whole bunch of clients that you don't want anyway? It seems like you're eating your own tail there. And then also, like I think the slippery slope when it comes to EB is that heaven forbid you lose a scheme or two. So now you've gone and hired people to adjust for that volume, and now you kind of lose a scheme or two. Now what do you do with those people if you don't need them anymore? So not playing devil, like maybe playing a bit of devil's advocate, but maybe the solution is not hiring. Maybe it's finding a more effective solution for the existing ones that you've got already that you're comfortable with, that kind of lines up with your morals and the level of advice that you want to give before kind of saying, right, is there a real critical need for us to add somebody in here?
Awesome. Thanks so much, Gareth. And yeah, I found that very interesting. Maybe, sorry, Shannon, I see your hand is up. Just a final question I have. So maybe being in a similar position to where you were 10 years ago, Gareth, if you had to look back and reflect and maybe think about advice you would give yourself to grow your business to 2.2 billion or 5 billion, what are those key points you would give to someone in a similar position to, let's say, when you join Crue Invest? One, to best serve your clients, and two, to obviously scale and grow your business in the correct way.
Yeah, I think probably the key is to be kind to yourself. In terms of saying, like, we kind of all have this utopian idea of what it means to best serve your clients. How could you have done it better, etc., etc. Like, at the end of the day, you're not the finished article, like Craig said earlier, and like Dirk said earlier, in terms of, like, you can't just pick up a sport or pick up a skill or whatever the case is, and expect you to be the finished product on day two. Even if you look at our profession, as the FBI likes to push forward, it's a flippin' young profession. Like, I remember, like, in my undergrad years, like, there was no such thing as doing an undergrad in financial planning. Now we're hiring several people who have done an undergrad in financial planning. It's evolving, it's growing. So appreciate the fact that you can do the same. I think also the other, probably maybe the more left field thing, is to not get such tunnel vision on, like, financial planning. So I almost deliberately take effort and time I do a lot of reading, and I try and read around the topic. So rather than kind of listening to too many offshore financial planning gurus, yada, 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 and then landing up in a bit of an echo chamber, I'll kind of go and read CEOs and businesses that have got nothing to do with our industry, because there's lessons and morals in there. And I think also in terms of like self-belief, discipline, and that for what we want to do, I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned out of, like, the guys in the military. I think it's if you want to go read a really good book, it's called Scheme Ownership, is a fantastic one, Jocko. And then and if you cut out all the kind of the macho rah-rah sort of military style, and you just look at the fundamentals and the lessons there and the approach, that's probably stuff that it would have been nice to have learned that at a younger age. But I think even if I look at myself honestly, I don't think I was ready to learn those lessons. I think I was too young, dumb, and arrogant to have accepted them back then.
Thanks, guys. Shannon.
Thanks, Dirk. Thanks, guys. Gareth, what made you not go it alone when you stepped out of the franchise environment? And second part to that question is, what was it that drew you to the practice?
Yeah, so I think that's so important, because people ask you that to this day. It's like, oh, you've got the successful thing, you can make so much money on your own. But I think again, it's going to come down to the individual. I didn't, although you work in a big business at the likes of when you're a retired agent, you are very much alone. You are 100% like your success or failures on your shoulders. And although there needs to be a lot of self-belief, I didn't enjoy that environment because it didn't feel like very sort of supported. There was no one there to share the successes with, and there was no one to kind of commiserate with the failures. There was no one to really turn to, kind of saying, look, I'm really struggling with this, or whatever the case is. So I do not believe that the level of success came down to me as an individual. I think it's hugely a collective effort. And it's massively about the people around you. So I think communities like what you guys have got going here are wonderful. But they're only going to be impactful if you can kind of be vulnerable and share and really ask like deep, meaningful questions like you can do. So yeah, I think that was a big part of the practice, was more the just the morals around it. I think kind of I had an opportunity to join another practice who's got a very, very good reputation. You know, got sort of double financial planner of the year winners and that sort of thing, also sort of based right down the road from where we are. I'd been exposed to them from a young age because my dad was one of their clients. And you know, it was they made me an offer, and you kind of go home and you sit on it and you just really think it's just not a good fit. You know, I probably do need to kind of be in a more independent space. I'm not a very good corporate drone. So I think that's sort of part of it. You know, it's much like clients. Clients are going to find a good fit for them, and then we're going to find a good fit for ourselves in terms of a practice that works. And I think that's what keeps me there today. You know, you help kind of build that environment and that culture, and you enjoy going to work. And yeah, I think that's kind of a big part of it, is that the guys are there to support each other. We enjoy one another's successes. We structure it as a collective. So when one wins, we kind of all win, and vice versa. And then it's taken time, but getting the right people within the practice, not just in terms of their capabilities, but just who they are as people as well. You know, we don't live in one another's pockets, but we do a couple of social things during the year, and we all have fun, you know, and we all enjoy each other's company. So I think that's hugely part of it. The environment and the culture is a massive contributor to the success.
Thanks, Gareth. Yeah, just on that, I mean, you know, 2.2 billion is a lot of money. And I know to most of us, or all of us on this group, I mean, it's absolutely massive, but obviously that is amongst quite a few planners. But I'm quite interested. I mean, what do you put down the exponential growth that you've had from COVID? So, I mean, you've basically, is it 3 or 4 years you've doubled the size of your, and I know there are a lot on this call that hate judging, they're calling it a 5 or 10 or a 50 million rand client. So we also, some people are against calling it when you judge the success of a business, we just go straight to what is the AUM, and I think the reality, as much as we don't like that, that is the reality. The AUM could be split amongst 500 clients, or it could be split amongst 100 clients. But so that's a whole nother story. But what do you put down the success over the last 3 to 4 years that has led to that exponential growth, especially in a time when the markets haven't exactly shut the lights out?
Yeah, geez, I don't think the markets have even turned the lights on. But like, no, I think in the last couple of years, look, I think it's probably one of the key factors is getting our presence on MoneyWeb. And I think also kind of being able to put out material, I think, to a wider audience. You basically you're marketing your service to, but it's kind of done in a way where people get to see the soul of your business before they've even spoken to you before. You know, like how is it that you approach money? What is your thinking around it? It's not kind of like, you know, so it's not that we deliberately don't make a point of it, but I think naturally we just, you know, we're not ones to try and use fear to incite selling, to create a solution where you must take all your money offshore, you must do this fancy footwork or that fancy footwork, or, you know, it's kind of saying like, look, you know, these are some of the concepts, these are the things you can do. It's going to be moldable to the person. So yeah, I think a lot of people that have approached us have kind of said like, you know, it's like, and once they have those first couple of meetings, it's like, geez, you know, after reading and following, and sometimes it's for years, they say like, geez, it's nice to see the consistency in terms of like what's out there. My perception of what your guys would be like very much reflects like what I've experienced. So, you know, kind of just being truthful, being real. Don't try and be more than what you really are. You know, we don't try and make hot stock picks or anything like that. And we focus on the people side of it. That's what our business is focused on, as opposed to the money in the AUM. And I think even when it comes to AUM, it's like it's all flipping relative, you know, as you say, like there's a numerical relativity in terms of saying, okay, that's great. If you've got one planner, that's fantastic. If you've got 500 planners, you know, that's a little bit more sort of moderate. But really, it's kind of, we just use it as a benchmark to say, like, well, are we moving forward? Are we looking good? And again, it all comes back to that touchstone of like, well, what the hell are you trying to create? You know, because if you don't know where you're going, you have no idea if you're making progress or not. And so, yeah, I think having, again, it sounds boring, but having like-minded people, the people are huge. It's if you think about how much time you spend with your colleagues every day, every week, you've really got to find the right people that you know, outside of them and your spouse. I mean, you're the only person you spend more time with. So, you know, make sure that they're good people, they're interesting people, they're honest, they're truthful, you can trust them. I mean, the standing joke is I joined the practice 2015, and for basically 5 years, I was still the newest employee. we just had this stable team for the longest time. And if anything, we haven't had a lot of turnover. We've added people. So yeah, we've kind of had like a slow, very organic, natural growth.
I think, Gareth, when you are on your own in Liberty, I mean, there are a lot of, well, there are not necessarily a lot, but there are people who want to build their own business. They want to create a legacy. They want to have something that they're proud of. Were you wanting to build your own business, or and if so, what did it take to suddenly go from having that kind of vision to being part of a team? And then also, sorry, but how do you? I mean, where do you think you would have been if you're trying to build this on your own versus joining a team?
Sure. If I was on my own, I don't think I would be anywhere close to where I am individually now, because it's so flippin' lonely. I take my hat off to people that build their own practices, because that's tough. And also having to, particularly as it scales up, you know, like where you can't just, you know, when you get out there, all you really want to do is see people, have discussions, create solutions, look after them, etc., etc. But then you get kind of the tidal wave of all of the industry compliance and requirements and box ticking, and you know, and it's hellishly frustrating, because it's kind of like, I mean, I'm not one for compliance and all the rest of it. It's kind of like, you know, and it's that typical thing that historically it's you know, a few loose cannons have kind of created the need for all of these sort of lead lines with compliance and that. So to do it on your own is flipping hard. I don't think I could do it, to be honest.
Yeah, thanks, Gareth. Shannon?
Gareth, I see from your website, one of the prominent things that jumps up at you straight away says fee-based advice. Could you elaborate on how you guys charge? Do you charge planning fees as well as AUM fees, etc.?
Yeah, so I think when we talk about fees, it's fees on assets under management. And I think also, like, in the days when that was created, and that's just kind of stuck with us, like if you think sort of mid-2000s when the business launched, everything was still very much commission focused and based. So, you know, kind of to earn fees on assets was still relatively new back then in the planning space. And I think what's happened is the sort of planning fee, time-based fee thing is kind of caught up, being introduced later down the road. So we look at it and we say, look, our approach is we personally don't enjoy doing a fee for a plan and somebody walks away, just because we feel like it's kind of like you can't go for a single consultation, like if the thing that you want to do is not an immediate fix. You know, planning is very much a journey, and it's dynamic. And the plan that you did today could very well be completely out of date in 6 months from now. So we rather take the approach where we say to somebody, look, this is how we do it. We'll have an initial discussion, explain our process. We'll ask you then to do the data capture. So we'll send them the F&A, they send us all the statements, yada, yada, yada. And then we put together what we call our workshop session. So we say, look, it's incredibly difficult to ask you to commit to a service that you've never seen before. So then we go and we do sort of an hour, 2-hour workshop session, depending on the complexity, take them through our philosophies, our financial education, through what we see their solution would possibly be, how we do the modeling, all the kind of decision points so that they get an understanding of what they would experience as a client. We then have all of the planning software open. They can fill it around live with us if they really want to. And then we actually encourage them, even if they're keen on the day. We say, no, go and sleep on it, go and discuss it. We've dumped a heck of a lot of information on you in one day. And then make a decision from there. And we just say, look, we see that as our marketing cost. That's the way we approach it. So that, because we also, like, just because somebody's got 15 or 20 million assets that you could potentially manage, they may be a horrible person. You don't want to deal with them anyway, So it's also an opportunity for us to gauge, can we work with this person? So that's kind of how we go about it. There's been very rare instances. I think it was only really during COVID, not necessarily because we were desperate for the money, but people were desperate for the service, in terms of, like, I did 2 estate plans. And there, you kind of, an estate plan for a fee does sort of make sense, because it is a bit of a snapshot of where it looks like right now. But financial plans for a fee is just not something that we kind of do.
Thanks, Gareth. Peter.
There we go. Thank you so much, Gareth, for sharing your journey and everything. It's been very insightful and valuable. I'm just curious, with your big business from Crue Invest, obviously you have good marketing strategies, sourcing clients. Do you have like a specific process to kind of vet clients? Do you have an ideal client that you want to work with? Being on the assets under management, is it like a minimum entry point, or how do you kind of gauge if it's not a good fit? How do you approach that?
Look, I think we're fortunate at this very point where we've got planners at different levels. So we don't have to be as explicit in terms of saying, look, you need to have X amount before we can even work with you. And we'll joke and we say, look, I think our ideal client is somebody who genuinely wants advice. Don't try and market segments saying that we work with these people, or medical professionals, or scuba divers, or pilots, or I just think it's kind of like, I don't quite understand that. It's like also when I see on LinkedIn and I see people advertise saying, oh no, I'm an advisor to ultra high net worth individuals and that. And I was like, okay, that's wonderful. Doesn't make sense to me. It's kind of like a doctor saying, like, I'm an oncologist, but only for stage 3 cancer or more. It's kind of like, okay, and other guys with cancer. Yeah. So into, like, I would say, like, people say, oh, what's your marketing strategy? We say, well, it's very simple. We kind of just, we put out information that we feel people will find valuable and useful, and try and package it in a way that's understandable. That's our marketing strategy. Yeah, I think we're lucky there with the client, and I think also part of it now, because you build up that awareness, and that we are very fortunate that people are picking up the phone to us that do have considerable assets. So in terms of a minimum, we're just lucky, and it's taken a long time to get you, that's not really a concern too much anymore. And the guys who do, like, to be honest, the guys who are really starting out, who don't have the assets, often we'll say to them, look, you can pay a planner and we can do this fancy solution and that sort of thing. But the stage you're at, the most important thing you can do is go and save. So we'll just say, go to a list, use a platform, use a passive, if you will, use a balanced fund. Don't overcomplicate it, because quite honestly, it is not going to make that much mathematical difference right now. Just get going.
Thanks, Gareth. I think also it just reflect on, when you start off, when you were at Liberty in those early days, and, I'm pretty sure you didn't have the liberty of choosing who you wanted to deal with versus where you are now. And I think, again, with this group, it's really important for them to understand that where you are now, you didn't get to overnight. Yeah,
I mean, at Liberty, they say if it bleeds, it needs. So, it needs a policy. off you go.
Okay, so and I think also, I mean, clearly your marketing, I know you guys have done a lot on MoneyWeb, other areas. I think that's just years and years of plugging away and doing that. That's allowed you to be in a position now where you have clients calling you, which is obviously what we'd all like. And I suppose that's also the benefit of being part of a bigger business versus on your own, because you've got more people who can put out more information, or how does that work?
Yeah, so we've obviously got a number of people that enjoy contributing, that want to contribute, and we're happy. If somebody's got an idea, we say, cool, go and draft the article, whatever. We'll check it. We'll decide where to put it out. So it's not explicitly the 4 planners that are there. You know, we're very fortunate in that Craig's wife Sue she loves writing. She's a very good writer, and that's basically what she does. So yeah, we talked scale earlier and like leveraging of people's different interests and skills. So yeah, and there's one or two, like I enjoy sort of drafting and writing and having a couple of ideas and a little bit more wacky stuff every now and again. But yeah, it's very much a collective effort. I think also when you're on your own, I think then a case of just like almost like over servicing your clients, being kind of a big part of their lives, so that you're top of mind, not because you want them to buy more, to sell or whatever the case is, but just if you're having good interactions, valuable interactions, then human beings, we like talking about good experiences, and then naturally they're going to talk to friends and family and that sort of thing, and it will grow from there. But when you're starting out, the most important thing is to be able to be around in 5 to 10 years from now. That's all you need to focus on.
Thanks, Gareth. Ben.
Thanks, Gareth, for everything you shared so far. I'd just like to know just a little bit more about your journey at Crue. I mean, you said you started off the first 6 months not earning an income. Like that's quite hectic. Like to now, where you're quite an influential part of the setup there. And it has taken time. But sort of through that, did you kind of start off as a paraplan and you work towards this? Were you servicing existing clients? Did you have to go out and find your own? Kind of just a little bit about that journey. How did things change within the business? I mean, you say you were the newest employee for 5 years. Obviously, you're quite small and insecure at that stage. What did that look like? Maybe some of the feelings you're thinking about. So now you suddenly exploded. I mean, it must be quite, it's quite a journey, all of that to happen in relatively short space of time. And did you imagine that happening? And can you just talk us through that?
Yeah, I think it is a short space of time. There's one of Bill Gates' quotes I love. It says, people often overestimate what they can do in a year, but drastically underestimate what they can do in 10. And looking back, that holds true. If you had told me when I started, this is where we'd be now, not just me, I don't think any of us would have believed you. So that's the thing. It's not like we sat down sort of 9 years ago and said, right, this is where we're going to be, and that's what we're heading towards. Even the business was still very much a case of like, guys, we're head down. We're just trying to be around in 5 years from now. And that's the thing. If you get those little wins, if you get that momentum going. So I think I was excited just because I felt like I was in an environment now that spoke more to my soul, who I am. I'm pretty good at sales, kind of always have been, but that's why I say, like, I don't see it as like some dirty thing, because I'm not doing it to get one over on you. It's use that skill to be able to communicate a problem and solution to someone who may not be able to see it for themselves. So it's kind of like you take it in terms of like, okay, cool. So you're sitting with this family and they need X, Y, and insurance and that sort of thing, but they're kind of just worried about the cost, or they just sort of feeling very arrogant or whatever. So it's about being able to have that. Sorry, I'm going very off topic here. Have that ability to kind of communicate through, and maybe that's where I was a little bit different to the other guys who were there. Like one of the other sort of more senior planners who joined with us earlier is a lot more years experience with me, and is kind of like the qualified lawyer and CFP and sort of like very technically competent, but not a great marketer or social person. So we all have our pros and cons and that sort of thing. So we've had like a nice sort of very diverse skill set to learn from one another and lean off each other. Probably the fun part was like we just worked in an open plan space. You know, we don't have fancy offices even today. I mean, pretty much still in that same attic that we started out in the house, you know. So and I think being, you know, although you kind of the newbie, I didn't feel new for very long. You know, again, it's just one of those environments, and that's very much led by Craig and Sue, who started the business. You know, just who they are as people. You don't feel out of place, certainly not for very long. You know, and if you do, that's in your own head. So that was hugely helpful. In terms of getting clients and that, again, it was very organic. I think from a couple of years of kind of developing this tiny little client base that I'd established at Liberty, you know, you kind of sifted through, and I think even unknowingly you're finding good people. Like a lot of those people are still clients of mine today. A lot of those people have immigrated and still clients today. So they were still referring. I think they also got more comfortable when I went independent, because I think their experience, if you think about my approach to them, their previous experience was somebody's come to me as a representative of Liberty, they sold me a product and they've disappeared. Now I'm going through the same washing machine again. So it's kind of like, you know, oh, this oak's maybe a little different. Maybe he's here to stick around and long term. Again, it takes time to build that rapport, to kind of share that, to build that trust and belief. And then they started to open up themselves. And then obviously kind of like through other things. And then again, being very lucky that Craig and Sue, Craig in particular, the kind of person that he is, you know, wants you to be successful. So it's like, oh, so-and-so approach the business for whatever the case is, let's go and see them and they'll be your clients kind of thing. So that's why I say, like, if I was doing this on my own, I'd be very surprised if I was still like hanging in there. Where we are today is massively due to the environment and the collective effort.
Gareth, I've heard you use the words values, soul, and heart quite a bit today, which for me really comes through. And we talk about, to be a proper lifestyle planner, having the care gene, as Barry Amani describes it. And I think it's quite essential. But I think a lot of people battle with having that care gene and not being able to have that business brain on, because they do kind of conflict at a point. You know, there are a lot of people in this group who want to help people who aren't in great financial situations, and the battle is they can't pay us. So it's really, really tough. So yeah, just a comment on that, and because obviously you've clearly had that right from the beginning, because it is something you're born with. And then also when you spoke about goal setting, I know as a business we like battle to set monetary goals, because it's kind of, we'd rather try and focus on what's the stuff we're going to do, and then the outcome will be that. But again, you know, from a business planning point of view, that's not always very smart. So just on that, I mean, how do you guys do any kind of goal setting as a business, individually, personally, and then if you do, you know, what does that look like?
Yeah, just on kind of like the soul and that care gene and that. I think I learned a lesson from someone like a long time ago, like that, you know, they said to me, like, do you realize that like a lot of people that work in NGOs and whatever, some of the most selfish people around? Kind of said, what? You know, I said, yeah, but if you think about it, like if you are in that space where you have that care gene and your natural instinct is to want to help and look after others, but in that environment, often also going crazy. Sorry, it's very distracting. Yes, you're on a nightmare, right? If that NGO whatever loses its funding, you know, you're on a float to possibly slip back into an environment where you one of the very same people that you were helping, right? It's an extreme example, but the concept is there. So don't be kind of shy to say, yes, you need to help people, but at the end of the day, you need to You need to be able to earn a living, be able to earn an income from it so that you can continue to help not only those people, but more people as well. You know, that's the factor. A lot of people say, okay, hang on, but like you get your big corporates or whatever, they throw out money to their foundations and things. Yeah, there's probably just they're trying to buy a little bit of goodwill and tear out some of the guilty conscience in that. But the good news is that if you've got your own practice, you're in sole control in terms of how you generate the revenue, the way you do it, the approach that you take. And so long as you know that you're not kind of telling somebody take X, Y, and Z because you need to earn an income, not because they actually need it, then there should be no sort of guilt or bad feeling around that. In terms of the goal setting in the business and that, I mean, we as directors, we've only recently started doing this where we kind of just, we meet sort of once a month. We just check in and have a chat for an hour about just where the business is at. And like, it's funny, the term of like, how much AUM do we want? How many clients, yada, yada, never really comes up. We actually just focus on the process, the teams. We say, okay, fine, like we've brought somebody in to start heading up like maybe more of a client servicing team, right? So what is she going to need in the next couple of years or whatever the case is in terms of mentoring and guidance and are there any technical skills that she's going to need or training or whatever the case is, and also like how many people do we feel like needs to be part of her team. So I think the planning things to say like I think a lot of it comes down to how do we best serve our existing clients, how do we make sure we've got capacity to take on more clients. We know that we want these junior guys to be planners of their own one day, so we know that naturally we're going to need a higher headcount because they're going to need people to support them. We're going to need people to support us as they move on as well. So those are the kind of conversations that we have, and we look at needs and that sort of thing. I think the tricky part, and maybe COVID taught us any lesson, is that you can't plan too far in advance. You can say, oh, we want to be here in 3 years from now, but in 3 years from now, nobody knows what the world's going to look like. It could be a drastically different place. So you can't really plan for 3 years, maybe 3 months. Break it up into those chunks and have a direction, but we don't have like a finish line as such.
Okay, great, thanks. Guys, any other questions for Gareth?
Nothing from the ladies this morning. Are there any questions from the ladies? I always find it interesting because like it's such like a male macho thingy, whatever, and like you girls are
not really,
naturally more inclined to be client facing than what we are, particularly with my face.
One thing I can say is that we're all women at the business, so I'm not used to this.
Really, you all what?
Yeah, at Foundation, we're only women at the company, so it's something quite different. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're only a handful of guys in the business as well, but like it tends to be, we have that like stereotypical thing where it's like mostly the guys are the planners, and then look, a lot of our junior ladies and that sort of thing are young CFPs and will be planners and that sort of thing, and 2 of our junior planners are ladies. And I've found it so interesting, kind of like sitting in with meetings with them and working with them and that sort of thing, and getting their perspective on it. It's been so lekker. I've loved it.
Gareth, one question. People who come into the business, we know that despite qualifications and what we'd like to be, not everyone is cut out to be a client-facing planner. And I think this maybe also speaks to what Becky was talking about is, you within a business, you can have people who play different roles, especially in a business that is a bit bigger like yours. How do you handle situations? Because there must be times when someone comes in and they have ambitions and then you work out that they simply just not cut out for that. How have you had to deal with that? And if so, how have you dealt with that?
Yeah, so that's a new thing that we're kind of contemplating as well. Like particularly having our first batch of like genuine sort of like real students going into paraplanning, sort of going into this more junior planning role. I hate the term. And yeah, I think we'll kind of do it on an individual basis. That's why we kind of you know, we'll get them into the meetings for a bit of exposure so they can see what it's about. We will, with certain clients, you know, or maybe there's a student that's freshly graduated that needs a bit of advice, we'll give them the opportunity to present a workshop and that sort of thing, so that they can see what it feels like, and is it something that they genuinely want to do. The reality is, I think our most recent hire now, who joined us in November, we've said, like, she's probably our first genuine paraplanner, somebody who's come in and said, guys, like, I've had a couple of these roles. She's even been a BC and all the rest of it for one of the insurers. And she said, you know what, she enjoys the paraplanning. She enjoys the number crunching and the technical work behind the scene and that sort of thing. But she doesn't really want to be client facing as such. So, you know, there's space, and we're kind of seeing, as this thing matures and professionalizes, there's going to be more scope for professional paraplanners, and they add a hell of a lot of value. You know, so I think kind of this explicit pursuit of this title of financial planner, or whatever the case is, you know, there's going to be a lot more scope for people who want to do different aspects of the business.
Great, thanks, Gareth. Shannon?
Gareth, when you recruit or bring on a new individual on board, do you prefer taking someone fresh out of studies, or do you like to have somebody who studied and had a little bit of exposure to the industry, or are you indifferent? Is it more about the person?
Yeah, very indifferent. I think it's the person. You know, it's kind of like, is this going to be a good fit for the business? Yeah, there's an element, like, do they have, it depends on the role, you know, so it's kind of like, if they're a fresh young graduate, we don't expect them to be able to pump out a professional plan from day one. But they've got that competency, we know that we can teach them very quickly, and they learn very quickly. And with other people with more experience in that, they come with a lot of value that you probably don't even think of. You know, they've experienced other things and that sort of thing. So we kind of very indifferent. Again, we don't have kind of a prefabricated mold of what people need to be. And I think that served us well, because we've got such a sort of splayed set of skills. I think the collective is a lot stronger. I think it knits together a lot tighter, and it makes it a lot more kind of adaptable and kind of capable of weathering storms. You know, if you've got the same typecast person in your business, you just land up in an echo chamber. So, you know, and that's something we're kind of very aware of.
Right, thanks. Gareth, one last question from me. Do you guys, you mentioned early on that you do a lot of reading, which is kind of learning, ongoing learning. Do you guys within the business, do you kind of see that as something that's important? Do you encourage it within the business, or is everyone just kind of left to their own devices there?
Yeah, so that's actually something that I've kind of spearheaded in the last year. And again, I find that it's not that people don't necessarily want to read. Maybe they sometimes haven't been shown sort of like some good stuff to read. Maybe people have the interpretation they need to read textbooks about financial planning to improve. So, you know, I was, again, lucky. So much of this is not down to me. It's just down to my experience. Like, my dad's a big reader, you know, and he kind of showed me this awesome website, which I'm not going to share because I clean it out all the time, with secondhand books, and they come out in brilliant quality. So it's kind of like, you know, for $50 a pop, you're picking up these amazing titles. And I've built, well, we're in the process of building like a library at work. And then I try to get multiple copies. And then I've just been running little, very informal, like book clubs with the guys. And then so I'll say, right, this is what we're going to read. This is what the sections are. This is when we're going to review it. Like, are you keen? You know, and then it's on them. Because again, it's not always a case of like, you know, that they don't want to do it. They might not be in the space to do it. I look at like Alex that works with us. He was getting married towards the end of last year, and it was like almost his time to join. And he just said, like, I'm so frantic with wedding planning. And I was like, don't stress, you know, we'll just do it in the new year. So, so yeah, it's just titles. Again, there's no scientific approach here. It's just stuff I found interesting, lessons and concepts to learn there, just to get the juices flowing a little bit, and then kind of building the space where you know, the guys will kind of go through it, and then afterwards they're like, oh, okay, so what do you recommend next? And then, you know, kind of like just finish the first rounds, and I want to pick up the next one and maybe start doing like a dual stream, because a lot of them I've read before. So I'm kind of like just skimming through it to prep for the discussion. But yeah, like there's a whole world out there. You know, I was listening to someone talk the other day and saying like there's probably about, for every person alive today, there's about 14 people that have passed away. So there's about 100 billion people, you know, of collected history that we can learn from. And then if you just look at our own life experience now amongst all the 7 billion people that are alive today, there's such a tiny fraction, and yet it makes up a huge portion of our worldview. So that's why I kind of encourage the wide-ranging reading and that sort of thing.
Great, thanks, man. Gareth, thank you so much. I'm sure you didn't expect to spend all 90 minutes talking, but yeah, I mean, I think congrats on your journey. It's absolutely inspirational, but I know it's come about because you've really put in the effort. And I think that's really what I wanted the group to see, is that, you know, it's very easy to lose hope and to doubt, especially when you're on your own and you're battling along. But yeah, well done, and thanks for sharing your story. And guys, I know, as you can see, Gareth is very willing to help. So I'm pretty sure if you reach out to him on LinkedIn, he'll have a conversation with you when he has time. I know he'll make the time. But Gareth, thanks so much, bud. You're an absolute example for everyone, and carry on with the good work.
Yeah, thank you, everyone, and you guys keep up with this. It's lekker. I still take my hat off to you guys who are on your own. I can't believe it. I could never do it.
Excellent. Thanks, guys. We'll see you online, otherwise next month. Cheers.
Cheers. Thanks, Gareth.
Thanks.
Cheers, everyone.
Okay, bye.
Cheers, thanks.